We are back with another episode of Dynasty Decisions, the first one in the post-draft era where we have a lot to talk about. We got 8 teams that we're going through today, a lot of rookie draft decisions, a lot of, who should I go with based on my team construction. This should be a very informative video to the people, obviously, that submitted this, as well as to those of you guys. So, of course, you guys know the drill with Dynasty Decisions. If you want to submit your team, want to skip the line, head on over to flockfantasy.com, promo code FSC users only. We'll have the access to skip the line, but of course, you'll also get all of our other Dynasty rankings and trade value charts and all that good stuff. So we're not going to waste any more time. Let's get right into it. All right, so the first team on the docket for us here is from Diego, a 12-team PPR, 6-point per passing touchdown. Looks like it's a tiered PPR format with a half to running backs, 1 to wide receivers, 1.5 to tight ends. Superflex league with Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, and Anthony Richardson heading out as quarterback core. Very strong there. A lot of zero RB guys there. Roshan, Zach Charbonnet, Chase Brown at running back. Chris Olave, Devontae Smith, T. Higgins, Christian Watson, Josh Downs, Jahan Dotson, and others at wide receiver. And then Kyle Pitts, Michael Mayer, Greg Dulcich at tight end. In possession of the 101, the 104, 110, and 201, as well as 4 additional firsts, it looks like in 2025, and an additional 2026 first is how I'm reading this. So Diego in a very, very good spot here. He said the quarterback passing touchdown is actually worth 5 points in his league. So again, not a 6-point per passing touchdown, a 5-point per passing touchdown. And he said he's made plenty of other trades getting first-round picks, as you guys can see, but he feels like he won those, so he didn't include them. So heading into the second year of the league, I'm assuming he's looking for advice on which direction to go with said rookie picks that he has here. So I don't know. What are your thoughts with that 1-1, that 1-4, and that 110 and 201?
Yeah, it's a clear house money team. I mean, you already have the framework. I mean, getting that quarterback core with also that pick liquidity is an absolute insane spot to be, especially knowing that one of those picks is the 101, man. So you're going to have to make a decision because you don't want to enter your next upcoming season with 4 quarterbacks on the roster between Burrow, Kyler, Anthony Richardson, and Caleb Williams. My first plan of action is seeing the teams that missed out on the quarterback liquidity, because you do have 101, you do have 104. Maybe some teams that need quarterbacks might panic. At that point, the 2 guys that I'm looking to move are Anthony Richardson and Kyler Murray, or Anthony Richardson and Joe Burrow, knowing the market value at hand here.
Yeah, I mean, this would be the type of team where I'm sure Diego might want to know, should I just take Marvin 101 because I already have these 3 other quarterbacks? We would say if all else fails, to me, I would say I'd be okay with doing it, but try and trade down to 102, try and trade for maybe one of those veteran wide receivers, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, or something like that. If all else fails and you can't get off of that 101, I'd be okay just taking Marvin with that pick, to be honest.
Hey, DD stands for Dynasty Decisions, but it also stands for due diligence. You gotta see if you can get that equivalency on the market. And the main guys that I see here are, if Anthony Richardson can get you the 102 where you can transition the Anthony Richardson value into Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm doing it. If somebody's willing to overpay at that point, either for the 101, Kyler Murray, or Joe Burrow, I'm doing it. Because if you can transition some of that quarterback value you have on your team, by far, even if you get rid of 1 or 2 of these guys, in my opinion, one of the better quarterback duos in your league. If you can transition that to a wide receiver or 2 future capital, seeing that you're already dominating that 2025 class, that's your best interest, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And then at 104, I mean, hopefully you're not looking at another quarterback with that pick. I would definitely take into account what the 103 needs. If they are, very solid at quarterback and they're a risk of taking Malik Neighbors, I would 100% look to move 1 spot up to make sure you get Malik Neighbors and not, Drake May or Jaden Daniels. As much as I love Drake May and Jaden Daniels, I mean, we're talking about you potentially adding Caleb Williams to this team. It would be kind of a little bit of a nightmare if you also had Drake May and Jaden Daniels as the best available players, in which cases you'd probably want to trade that pick for a veteran wide receiver, maybe want to trade down. I mean, hell, this is the type of team, to be honest, that I wouldn't mind overall cashing in some of these assets for like a stud running back. Like if you took the 104 and sold it for Bijan Robinson, or sold it for Breece Hall, or sold it for Jahmyr Gibbs, I wouldn't blame you one bit, because if you did add some running back talent to this team, you could definitely be competitive year 1.
Question I have here, hypothetically, he goes, maybe he's unable to trade from the 101, takes Caleb Williams, is able to trade the Anthony Richardson spot, even if he has to add, let's just say, I don't know, Gabe Davis. Somebody's a little bit optimistic about him going to Jacksonville, Khalil Shakir, Dontavian Wicks, somebody like that, and you can transition Anthony Richardson into Marvin Harrison Jr., then at that point, it's like, well, you take Caleb, you have Joe Burrow. Can Kyler Murray straight up get you Bijan Robinson at that point? Or maybe you might even get able to add a little bit of a plus. Because then at that point, if we're contextualizing this quarterback core of, let's just say it ends up being Caleb Williams, Joe Burrow, you have Bijan as your main anchor running back, you have Marvin Harrison Jr. and potentially Malik Neighbors at that 104 out of the score. I think that's a team that can compete for a championship as soon as this year, especially if you can figure out
absolutely. I think it's more likely, to be honest, that he just has to take Marvin 101. I think like what you're suggesting would be an ideal scenario, but I don't think it'll be possible because that all is predicated on the fact that someone's really high on Richardson. They're going to give up Marvin Harrison. They need a quarterback and not a wide receiver. So for me, I think it's going to be more likely that Marvin's his 101, 104. Maybe he wants to try and trade that for a stud running back. 110. Maybe you could also trade for a running back too. Cause like, I'm not married to making these picks if I need to, but like at the same time, you add Marvin 101, it knocks your receivers all down a notch. You could add an Xavier Worthy at 110, a Brian Thomas Jr. at 110, or you could shop that for a second running back. Like let's say 104 gets you Jahmyr Gibbs and you sell 110 and it gets you Travis Etienne or something like that, or maybe even a better option like Jonathan Taylor. Like you could absolutely compete year one, I think, with that kind of core.
The other context is he does also have the 201. So if you want to add Jonathan Brooks or Trey Benson at that spot, you can absolutely do it in that way, in my opinion. If you can trade for one running back, whether that's Bijan or, like you said, maybe 110 plus a piece gets you like a Jonathan Taylor, then at that point you can just say, well, hey, like I don't need to do much other than just take whichever running back I like at the 201, because knowing the board, you're either going to get a running back you like at the 201 or you're able to get a receiver that just fell past ADP, whether that's Worthy, McConkey, or Thomas.
Yeah, and also, too, the outside scenario exists where, based on the trades that he made, his league doesn't value draft capital, which looks to be the case very much. And you might just be in a house money year. You add, say, Marvin 101, Malik 104, 110 is Xavier Worthy, and 201 is Jonathan Brooks. You're going to be in a situation this year where, you don't have any running back production on your roster, but you have 4 ones in the bank if your team starts performing that you could buy a running back during the season. Or as we know about the 2025 class, maybe that's where your running back core comes from. With all of those 2025 firsts, you could add running backs in next year's class, which projects to be better. So speaking of the trades, and then we can move on to the next team here. He did send away Quentin Johnson in 212 for Christian Watson and a 26 first. Don't even need to talk about that deal. You absolutely fleeced that guy. Jordan Addison, Kareem Hunt, 409, and a 26th. I don't know what that is supposed to be, 4th maybe, for Devontae Smith. I mean, so it's Jordan Addison plus some trash for Devontae Smith. I like that move. And then 2 2s in 2025 plus 2 3s in 25 and 26 respectively for Kyle Pitts. So again, all of these trades, I mean, he said he's basically been fleecing his league for years now. So I would say
it's second year.
There's a reason you're in the position you're in.
He's heading into the second year of this league. So I don't know, maybe in the 1-2 rounds of your startup, you got Joe Burrow and Kyler Murray, but you also, I mean, you traded for Kyle Pitts, actually. You paid 2. So that guy drafted Kyle Pitts early in his startup. And then after a year just said, you know what? I'm trading him for 2 2s and 2 3s. Kudos to that guy. I don't know what he was thinking, but hey, like you've built something here. Just contextualize that right now. If there's one thing you've taken away from this DD is there's more optimistic moves that we want to be making because you have the roster and you have the framework to turn this thing into an absolute monster, which you've already been, making the steps to. Christian Watson plus a first for QJ plus a 212. Smash move, like you said. Devontae Smith for Jordan Addison and some junk. Smash move. Kyle Pitts for 2 2s and 2 3s. Smash move. If you can keep making deals like this, your league mates may not want to trade with you within the next couple of years once they realize how much of a juggernaut you have.
Yeah, you might want to get the buy-ins up front here because this has a league. This has the makings of a league that folds if you do this thing the right way, and that's the challenging tightrope you got to walk in some of these dynasty leagues. You don't want to build such a dominant force that people want to leave the league, which would be potentially a risk. I don't know if you know these guys in real life or whatever the case is, but we don't have to spend much more time on Diego's team. He's obviously in a very, very good spot. A lot of options. I would just say, Diego, last thing. Anything that you need to do to outline your options at 101, write down, okay, I could trade this for a veteran wide receiver. I could take Marvin Harrison here. I could just take Caleb Williams here and then trade one of my other quarterbacks. Just write down all of your options and get kind of clear on what you're looking to do. So Diego's obviously in a very good spot. Let's move on to the next team here, which is from Brendan Bello, 10-team PPR league, 1 quarterback format, but he's in looks like a pretty good spot here, I would say, with Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, and others at quarterback. Jahmyr Gibbs, some 0 RB guys, Aaron Jones, James Conner, that kind of stuff behind Jahmyr Gibbs at running back. And then you also have Jamar Chase, St. Brown, AJ Brown, Calvin Ridley, and then some other depth pieces there at wide receiver with Trey McBride, David Njoku, Noah Fant at tight end. Doesn't have his one by the looks of it, but he does have 2 early 2s next year.
quarterbacks,
Also
by the
doesn't
way.
have his one in 2026. This is like a built up the studs and collected a bunch of depth draft picks to build around said studs. So it's a weird situation. You don't usually see this kind of very often. Usually when teams have a lot of studs, they don't have a lot of depth. Usually they're looking for depth, and you actually have good depth plus the additional pick capital in the mid rounds to be able to replenish that depth.
2 QB league, by the way. It does say 2 there. So keep that in mind. It's not a super flex. It is a 2 quarterback league. So having Kyler, having Dak, having Cousins, having Goff there, very good spot.
And Penix.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even notice Penix at the bottom there. I don't know why he's below Howell and Trey Lance, but hopefully maybe this year's Trey Lance season at some point, who knows?
Yeah, he's got his handcuff to his Dak Prescott. That's what's going on there. And Hendon Hooker too, handcuffing his Jared Goff. So anyways, Brendan's team here, he said he made some big moves since his last submission 2 months ago, sacrificed some long-term flexibility for some top-notch players. Nobody wants any of his seconds for their vets, even rebuilding teams. He said he's working on a deal right now that would involve Breece Hall and Bryce Young, which would involve him moving Dak off of that team and James Conner plus seconds. I don't know why the hell that guy would want to make that move, sell younger players for older players. Doesn't really make any sense to me, but he basically said other team has all win now vets and Josh Allen. So I guess that's why he'd be buying Dak Prescott, and his QB2 is Derek Carr. So he's clearly panicking on Bryce Young. To me, I would just roll into the season if I was that guy and hope that Derek Carr and Bryce Young can get me by a quarterback, and then buy a quarterback too at that point if I needed to. But regardless, he said he'll hold on to the production of Dak or fill out, he said, should I hold on to the production of Dak in a 2 quarterback league or fill out my running back core for the foreseeable future?
If that's the offer,
obviously, and Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, I'd make that move yesterday, to be honest.
Yeah, and you guys know how much of a big Dak Prescott fan I am, but even if you're equating Breece Hall to Dak Prescott, given the 2 quarterback nature, again, I would still slightly have Hall higher in my rankings, but I can see, given the 2 quarterback nature, you have Dak Prescott on that lane. The fact is I would take Bryce Young over James Conner plus a couple seconds every single time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even if those are the early seconds, it's a 10-team league. Those will end up being basically late first, essentially. If they're, 201,
you have all those picks.
It's like you have the picks to be able to make that move. So yeah, I would definitely make that move if you can. Some of the trades that he ended up making here on February 29th, he sold this year's 101 Amari Cooper in a 2025 second, and he received Jamar Chase in a 2026 second. This is actually quite similar to what we just said Diego should do, which is sell the 101 for Jamar Chase. Essentially, it was that deal, but there was a little bit of other stuff involved. Great move there. He also sold off Joe Burrow in a 26 first. I'm assuming it was his for Dak Prescott, AJ Brown, Aaron Jones, and a 26 second. So this is an interesting deal. I mean, you're trying to compete, obviously, so I understand going after Prescott. For me, I love Burrow. I always have loved Burrow, to be honest, but I do think this is a stomachable price to move off of Burrow. You get Dak, who's going to give you similar production to Burrow, I would say, probably a little bit less. And then you get AJ Brown, who's going to be a needle mover. You also get a second back, which could be an early second, who knows? And then Aaron Jones is another production piece for your running back core.
Yeah, you're a contending team. AJ Brown's going to be a needle mover for your starting lineup. And realistically, given the fact that you already have Kyler, you have Dak, you have Jared Goff, you have Cousins, it's like Burrow is, obviously a stud, but at the same time, it's like from a production standpoint, Dak is just a 3 years older version of him, to be honest, is kind of how I view it. And the stomachable price, like you said, 2026 first on that side, but getting AJ Brown, getting Aaron Jones, getting that 2026 too in a competing window, I'd be shocked if there's a better team than yours in this entire league. I'm doing this every single time in your spot. I do like it.
Yeah, and then the next deal, I mean, I don't know why you had so many mid-round picks, but you were able to move up Cade Otton, Aiden O'Connell, a late second in 25, 3 mid to late seconds in 26. I guess they were just giving them out for free during your startup in 26. But anyways, he received Kirk Cousins, Austin Eckler, Hendon Hooker, Brendan Rice, and 3/3. So again, I look at this deal. I'm like, okay, Kirk Cousins, I guess, is worth that late sec. It's. I don't even want to try breaking this down. I would say it just furthered your ability to try and compete in this league. In a 2 quarterback league, I would say Kirk Cousins is probably worth 2 twos, to be honest. So he makes up for most of the deal. And then Austin Eckler, maybe he's worth 1 second if you're high on him. And then you got 3/3 to kind of make up the rest of the deal. So I think it was a pretty decent move all in all. And then when I just look at your team, like you said, it's hard to imagine there's people in better situations than what your team is looking like right now with the quarterback depth you have in a 2 quarterback league. Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra, AJ Brown, all these guys to help you produce. Trey McBride at tight end, Jahmyr Gibbs to anchor your running back core. If you end up making that Breece Hall deal, obviously you'll have a great running back duo for the foreseeable future, like you said. So I mean, there's not much else I would say to do. It's a 10-team league where you're starting 10 players. It's most likely
consolidate.
come down to high-end assets anyways. And your starting lineup, if you do make this Breece Hall deal, is going to be Kyler Murray, Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, whatever quarterback you put in your QB2 slot, maybe Michael Penix in the long term, Jahmyr Gibbs, Breece Hall as your top 2 running backs, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown as your top 2 wide receivers. In your flexes will be like A.J. Brown, Calvin Ridley, Aaron Jones, Tajay Spears, those type of guys. And you'll have Trey McBride at tight end with good tight end depth there as well.
Yeah, well, this was the last thing I was going to say. Obviously, there's not much value, like you said, for the seconds and the thirds in your league, as apparent with especially that 428 deal. You're kind of just, you already accumulated a bunch. You're like, fuck it, I'll throw a couple here. I don't mind that. The one thing I will say is if an opportunity arises where, Aaron Jones is producing your league, it does feel like a little bit more of a redraft centric type of room. If you can kind of up tier at a lot of that depth pieces, because again, in a 10-man start 10 league, you have a ton of depth, man. You have Gibbs, Breece Hall, potentially Connor, Aaron Jones, Tajay Spears, Jalen Warren, Austin Eckler, Rico Dowdle, maybe if it's just him and Zeke entering the backfield this year. And then at wide receiver outside of the studs, Calvin Ridley, Jerry Jeudy, Jahan Dotson, Demario Douglas, Ricky Pearsall, Brendan Rice, maybe not Brendan Rice, but Jermaine Burton. Like there's so many names you have. And even at tight end, David Njoku, Ben Sinnott, Noah Fant. It's like, if these guys see any relevance in the season and you could package a few of them to get an established, better option, like if it costs you Tajay Spears, Jalen Warren, plus a couple twos, and you could end up buying, I don't know, somebody is worried about Jonathan Taylor because he gets off to a bad start, try it. Like you never know, man, especially if it's a more vet-centric mindset of this room and Aaron Jones hypothetically is producing in the early portion of the year. Maybe if you're adding a bunch of known veterans, you can get an established blue chip piece.
Yeah, it might just be the second rounders that they're kind of opposed to. And if that's the case, just hold on to the twos and package veterans together if that's what the market looks like you said. So yeah, I would say there's not much else I would say about this team. You just kind of need to continue doing what you're doing. Your team realistically could add nothing to it, and you'd probably be ready to go out and compete next year. So looking at the next team that we have here, looks like some barren cupboards from Connor Seed, 12 team, 6 point per passing touchdown, super flex league. He does have some good young assets though. Drake May, Will Levis as his main guys there with some quarterback depth. That's interesting. Trey Benson as his main running back, Jalen Warren, some other guys there. Olave, Odunze, Drake London, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, Keon Coleman. So it looks like he's already had his rookie draft, and that's why the picks aren't listed there. Pat Freiermuth, Tucker Kraft, and Greg Dulcich does have 4 ones to bank up into the future. So, I mean, when you look at this roster, I feel quite good about your receiver core. I mean, you go 6 deep of guys that I'm interested in. You have 1 tight end I think should emerge from the group that you have between Freiermuth, Tucker Kraft, and Greg Dulcich. Trey Benson is a great anchor running back for the long term. He might have more value in the long term anyway. And Drake May, Will Levis, 2 young quarterbacks that I feel pretty good about. I obviously would love if they were your QB 2 and 3 rather than your QB 2 and 1 and 2. Sorry, I would say that'd be your major concern, but you have 4 ones next year. You have the ability to maybe add next year's QB1 in the draft, or maybe QB2 or whatever. We don't know how good the quarterback class is going to be next year, but if you end up with the 102 or the 103 and you can get Carson Beck on your roster or something like that, that would help out your roster. But yeah, when I look at this, I mean, in an ideal world, everybody hits, right? Your young team all hits, May, Levis, all those guys. And next year you just load up your running back core with the strength of the running back class.
100%. He also says here, like when he submitted the team, this is an update from the same team from April 17th and today. Ayuk trade did not age well, but I like Zay and Addison long-term and view both of them around the 109 to 110 value. So early, so who knows, but one at least of the first rounders that he traded for have a real chance of being a top 5 pick. So we'll cover the trade in a second. We'll talk about that deal. It's Jamar Chase in the 101, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But he says he loves May and all the value on his team, especially with the start 11, including 4 2025 first, but he's definitely in business for another quarterback. So his main questions, thoughts moving forward. Only want to sell my young assets if the value is there, but wondering if you guys like the idea of selling more assets to go for the 101. Thanks. So I'm assuming he means 101 in 2025, like tanking his pick because he wants to, get like Luther Burden or Ted McMillan or maybe one of those running backs. But for me personally, there's no real clear Caleb Williams. There's no real clear Bijan Robinson at this point. I think Luther Burden would probably be in the lead for that at this point for 2025. But you still have, for example, Carson Beck at Georgia. What if he has a national championship year? He could be the consensus 101. Or Ashton Janty, Boise State. Ollie Gordon from Oklahoma State. Like, there's so many names at this point, which although I favor Luther Burden or Ted McMillan to be the 101, that could emerge and take that 101 spot. So I don't really think there's really a necessary player that I'd want to completely strip this roster bare to go tank for next year. Like, it's not like there's just this surefire first round startup pick that we're going for.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you look at it this year. Obviously, it's both deep and top heavy this year. So this is a bad example. But last year was like, it was really top heavy with the top guys that went off the board, the 3 quarterbacks, the running backs, and then it kind of fell off around that 107, 108 range. This year in 2025, I think we might have like flat, a lot of good third round startup pick guys, like 6, 7 of those guys, but we won't have any first round startup pick guys, like you said.
Yeah, no, I agree. So in terms of that, obviously he already had his rookie draft, so we can just kind of go straight forward to these deals. First one, so I'll read it in chronological order here. He mentioned the Brandon Ayuk deal. I'll just read it off. He sends away Brandon Ayuk, the 2024 202. Doesn't really give context to who was picked there, but I'm assuming you're probably looking at Keon Coleman, maybe, Jonathan Brooks, one of those type of players, Xavier Legette, somebody's high on him, Penix or Nick, somebody in that tier. And Tony Pollard, he sent away in exchange for Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, and Jalen Warren. I would say I would personally equate the 202 plus Pollard to one of those wide receivers in Warren. And that's basically the other wide receiver for Brandon Ayuk. So I agreed. You probably lost the deal from a face value standpoint. But if you're high on those young wide receivers and you were worried that Brandon Ayuk was going to go to a bad landing spot, I can see the process as to why you would have made this deal.
Yeah, and I think given that you needed a lot more great assets, like both of these deals were getting more assets for one good asset. And that's kind of what you did with Ayuk deal as well as the Chase deal, where you sold off the 101 and Jamar Chase, 2 very, very highly valued startup assets. Both of those guys inside my top 10 startup assets overall, Caleb Williams and Jamar Chase. But you do end up netting, I'm assuming Drake May was who you took at 103, Chris Olave, and then 2 1s. And like you said, one of them has a chance to be really high. It's really difficult when you contextualize this deal because
I would have held it.
I think I want Caleb and Chase as well. Because I view a difference between Drake May and Caleb Williams. Is it a first round pick's worth of difference? I wouldn't say so, but Chris Olave and 2 1s for Jamar Chase is almost the going rate for him. So I look at this deal and I say, at face value, I think you got good return on investment. But at the same time, you gave up the 2 best assets in the deal.
So for reference, the reason why we're contextualizing this is because we can actually talk about a trade that we made personally. It's a start 10 league, not a start 11. So the depth in Connor's deal, given that it's a start 11, not a start 10, will mean a little bit more. But for reference, myself and you, we ended up making a deal. I was able to get Jamar Chase and Jahan Dotson in exchange for Garrett Wilson, DJ Moore, and that 2025 mid to late projected first round pick. I would prefer Garrett Wilson straight up to Chris Olave. DJ Moore worth roughly a first in his own right. And obviously 2025 mid to late first, 2025 first on his end. So I think that if you were to sell Chase, Olave is just right past the area that I would feel comfortable with. It would probably have to be a Wilson. It'd probably have to be a Puka. It'd probably have to be like a Malik Neighbors for me to make this move. And on top of that, as much as I love the 103 asset, whether that's Drake May, which you ended up taking here, or potentially Malik Neighbors, Jaden Daniels, if you guys like them, it's Caleb Williams. Like, I do feel like a first of difference is probably about the market rate between the 103 and the 101 in its own right.
Yeah, it's hard to contextualize that because it's only a 2-spot drop down, and even in a startup, I mean, it's only like a round of difference probably, but that's just
tricky.
How good I feel about the asset of Caleb Williams versus an asset like Drake May, who's still semi-volatile in his own right. So yeah, again, do I think you got a good return for these assets? Yeah, but at the same time, you gave up the 2 best assets in the deal, like I said. So that's the sketchy thing about this. Could definitely work out. I mean, if you look in the 101 out of this deal in 2025 and it ends up being maybe Carson Beck has a monster year this year, then you probably just swapped out, first overall pick for first overall pick with Caleb Williams and Carson Beck there. And it might be less, a little bit more manageable at that point in time. But regardless, the other deal was just 205. He traded up in the rookie draft to go get Trey Benson at 203. I think that was a fine move. You gave up a 4th rounder. Who gives a fuck? Like that doesn't mean anything. So yeah, definitely a good move. Overall, when I look at this roster, I just think you're in a house money year this year. That's why I look at it. It's like you got a good receiver core, good young receiver core, tight end, see what happens there. Quarterbacks need to develop. Obviously, they're not going to be ready to compete right away. And I doubt you're going to be in a situation where you're like pushing first into the middle of the pot because you have like this great team that just broke out simultaneously. It's more likely you're a year away from actually competing once you spend those 2025 picks.
Yeah, and the other context too, I mean, not to rehash it again, like it was solid value, but I think you could have gotten, like, you probably got 90%, I would say, of the return that I would expect if you're moving Chase in the 101. The other thing too is like knowing the context that you also drafted Rome Odunze, like I would have just taken Caleb and kept my Chase.
Yeah, absolutely. As much as I love having those extra picks in 2025, it's like it's easier to replenish depth even in a start 11 league than it is to get guys like Caleb and Chase who are bona fide first round startup picks and probably will be next year also. And one of those
Great.
guys, Caleb, might end up being the first pick in startups next year because he's that good of a prospect. So moving on to the next team here, I think Connor's in, again, a pretty decent situation. Definitely make sure to continue doing what you're doing and continue replenishing your assets. The next team here is from Austin Tone here. He's setting the tone on us. 10 team, half PPR lineup format, 4 point per passing touchdown, 1.5 tight end premium. So I'm assuming you get 1 point for tight ends if it's a half point scoring format. And it is a super
2X.
flex league as well. Justin Herbert, Jordan Love is the main quarterbacks. Good running back core, relatively speaking. Isaiah Pacheco, Nick Chubb, Brian Robinson, Najee Harris, J.K. Dobbins, and others there. DK Metcalf, Jordan Addison, Cooper Kupp. Josh Downs, a little bit lacking at the wide receiver position in terms of star talent. And then Michael Mayer obviously got a bomb dropped on him during the rookie draft with Brock Bowers coming in. And then Luke Musgrave is his other tight end there. So, I mean, when I look at this roster, it kind of seems a little hapless, if I'm being honest. It seems like you have like trying to compete, but like probably don't have the assets to compete. I mean, it's really nice that you have 103 this year, and it's really nice you have 109 and 202 and 206, and you have all of your future picks by the looks of it. It does say early second and early third plus late first in 2025. So I'm not sure if your first is not like you don't have your own first, or if you have someone else's first, or whatever the case is, or you have someone else's second and third. I'm not sure. But regardless, I think you definitely still have some work to do with this roster. If you add Malik Neighbors and you added, say, Xavier Worthy or something to this receiver core, I think it would look a lot better. And the nice thing is that you got like where you're picking 103, 109, 202, and 206, you might legit be able to add just like 4 receivers to this receiver core. But the other thing I might consider doing is using that 109 and seeing either if Bowers falls there or seeing if you can get up a spot or two to get Bowers.
100%. And assuming from the deal you made here on April 14th, I think you've probably narrowed your sights down to Malik Neighbors. He does make a trade here in exchange for Jordan Love, which we'll touch upon in a second. But I agree. You need a name to head that wide receiver group. And then obviously, if you can get maybe a running back to that 202, which we'll discuss in that plan in a second, I do think if you can add a Brooks or a Benson to that running back room, give it that nice leader, that nice anchor, you do have the depth to be able to compete this year.
Yeah, it's like I look at this team and he says here, like, feel like I didn't do too bad. Just need to hit with my draft picks. Who you taking? When that's your statement, if I just need to hit on my draft picks, you're probably not ready to compete yet. If that's your takeaway from your team is like, oh, all I have to do is hit big on my draft picks. And like, yeah, you could hit big on Malik Neighbors. You could hit big on, say, Xavier Worthy or Brock Bowers at 109. You could hit big on Xavier Legette or Trey Benson at 202 or, Adonai Mitchell at 206. You could do that. You're right. It's just that, like, you're going to need a whole lot to break right for you to actually compete with this team. And when I look at some of these deals, man, like, I know obviously you probably weren't expecting some of these things to happen, but I mean, the Calvin Ridley, Mark Andrews second and third deal, buying Deontay Johnson, Alex Madison, Kendre Miller, the 109, and the projected late first and early second. I mean, thank God you got those draft picks because the players you bought have really bottomed out in terms of value of what you bought them for at the time. So, again, good way to insulate your trades. You ended up getting picks out of that. But you're kind of stuck in a rebuild position, whether you like it or not. So you're saying, whether I hit on my draft, like if I hit on my draft picks, maybe I'll be in good shape. It's like, you can't compete though. Like you might be in good shape into the future. You just probably aren't going to be competing. And like, I'm assuming you didn't know the pick was going to be 101 that you sold for DK, Jerry Jeudy, Brian Robinson the second. I'm assuming, hopefully, at least, that pick was maybe mid when you traded it and it ended up becoming the 101. It wasn't great. Wasn't a great deal.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I gotta say it like it is. Like I understand, like you didn't plan that to be the 101, but even if you supplemented that as the 106, I'm still taking the 106 side. Like, were you maybe like caught in this place? Ooh, maybe I can compete. Maybe I can do that. Maybe who knows? Maybe your pick ended up being 109. You actually made the playoffs and you made the second round. I don't know, but if you knew the context of that pick being a non-playoff team, which you have to know, you can't think at that point of the year, November 10th,
information by that point.
Like that guy had to have been 2-4, 2-5 at that point, right?
Well, it's week 11, dude. That's like week 10, week 11, November.
Right.
10th. Like he would have been like 3-7 or something at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna we're blunt for a reason. We're trying to help. We're trying to learn the context here, but any way I slice it, even if we're pretending like that's the 106 and the 306, like I'm just keeping the side that you gave here. Even if you're in a contending window, like giving up a non-playoff first-round pick when we knew ahead of time that at least 6 players, possibly 7 or more, which it ended up actualizing to be, were going to end up being valued as top 45 assets. I don't understand the rationale. And obviously it worked out the worst it could have possibly because Caleb Williams is a first-round asset.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a lot of these deals, it just seems like you're kind of trying to do things on the fly and you don't really have a huge plan at this point in time.
Yeah.
So what I would do, I mean, we'll stop ripping on you here for a second.
Yeah.
What I would do is shed all win now productive assets off your roster. DK Metcalf, Nick Chubb, Cooper Kupp, Najee Harris, those type of guys, the guys that are complete win now assets. Shed this thing down to just young players. You have 2 quarterbacks that are young enough you can build around. You have Jordan Addison at wide receiver, Josh Downs at wide receiver, Dontavian Wicks at wide receiver. But like all your running backs, all of your older guys need to go off your roster. At 103, yeah, go ahead. Take Malik Neighbors, add him to the fold. That 109, maybe look to trade down. That's a honeypot potentially for someone wanting to come up for a Brock Bowers or for a Xavier Worthy or somebody like that. Maybe you can add additional capital in 2025 because this is a team that even if you hit on these picks, you're still probably like the 4th or 5th best team in your league.
Well, that's the thing too. The context here as well is I thought this was actually a 12-man league. The fact that this is a 10-man, like it even affects my decision even more. So you would have known even if that guy made the playoffs at the time that was going to be like a top 6, 7, 8 pick. So like I don't know. Like I'm trying to contextualize it here in a 10-man format. Like you need needle moving players, and it feels like you just rushed the bunch and lost your ability to attain those type of players. Like you have Justin Herbert, you have Jordan Love, but outside of that, it's like we don't have anybody valued within the first 3 rounds of a startup.
Yeah, and again, those 2 quarterbacks are going to be extremely valuable, but it's like
sure.
that's pretty much all you got at this point in time. And I'm assuming in a 10-man format, there's at least 2 or 3 teams that have much better rosters, especially knowing that you don't really have a solidified wide receiver 1 on this team. You don't really have a needle moving running back. You honestly don't have a startable tight end, let alone a good tight end. So definitely not in an ideal situation. You're going to have to probably peel this thing back, tear it down, and go back to the drawing board and learn from this mistake. Chalk it up to experience. Me and Danny have both done stupid 100%. Deals like this. When I don't know if you're new to Dynasty or whatever, but we had both done deals where we had moved off of first round capital for win now assets because we thought we could compete, and it didn't end up materializing like that. So I would say, yeah, you got some work to do. Feel free to leave any comments and questions down below, and we'll try and help you out the best that we can. But let's move on to the next team here, which is from Jonathan B here. The rare standard league making an appearance here. 12 teams standard, 4-point per passing touchdown, 1 quarterback, or sorry, super flex league. Obviously in rough shape, this roster here. Like, I don't even have to spend time reading the guys off. Geno Smith is your QB1 in a super flex standard. You got Keenan Allen as your wide receiver. Stephon Diggs as your wide receivers. Evan Ingram. It's like, I mean, he says he grabbed an orphan from a league a couple of years ago, or a couple of weeks ago. So he didn't actually make these mistakes, thankfully. And he said he punted a lot of the players that he got from the team into draft capital, which was the right move. But like, you're still fighting an uphill climb with this thing, man.
Bro, like this is the type of team where I'm going to keep it a stack other than the picks maybe you make this year. And even 2, to be honest, if you can get 2+ first-round picks for the 103, 2 first-round picks for the 105, I'm selling everything that I have here. Because I mean, on the roster,
there's not one asset here that's going in the first 8 rounds of a startup, realistically.
Like realistically, if there's a point where you can sell everybody in that lineup, not name the picks, and obviously, like I said, if you can get future picks plus for picks this year, the immediacy, people want to overpay now, like you're going to do that. Outside of those picks, though, if you don't sell them, every other roster player on this team, like if you're walking to the lineup and it's week 6 and you literally have no players in your quarterback super flex, no players in your running back, no players in your wide receiver, no players in your tight end, no players in your flex, that's the type of teardown we're talking here. Like there is no useful assets on this team for you.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to walk away from this rookie draft with like Drake May, Jaden Daniels or whatever. But like realistically, like you said, if somebody's willing to offer me like the 109 plus a 2025 first for the 105 this year or for the 103 this year, like I'm definitely going to do that because you're in, like you said, you picked this orphan up. If somebody offered me this orphan, I would tell them hell the fuck no, unless you're not paying into this league for like 2
you
years.
Paying my first 3 years?
Yeah, like you're not going to be even remotely competitive until 2026, assuming you do a great job.
Like you need to hit on every single move from here on out, and maybe you compete by 2026, 2027. I understand you understood this. You accepted the orphan because you wanted the challenge. I completely get that. And I'm not roasting anything you've done because like I said, whoever left this team in this type of situation and just dipped the league is a fucking asshole, to be honest.
Yeah, literally. We've all
Like-
seen leagues like this, though. Like, there's a team that got orphaned in my league about a couple days ago, right up to the rookie draft. And someone said, like, the guy was like, "Oh, I'm really busy with life right now, so I can't handle this dynasty league." And the first comment was, "How the hell does a team even get like this?" Was from the commission. Was like, "How did you even get this team this bad?" So, save me. You're like, "Oh, you're so busy in your real life. Like, you ran this team into the ground. That's why you're leaving the league. It has nothing to do with what's going on in your real life, in my opinion." So, this trade is a perfect example of this. The first trade, he didn't make this trade, obviously, because he said he took over this team a couple weeks ago. So this was January 3rd that this trade happened. So he didn't make this trade. Lamar Jackson, Garrett Wilson, and Brian Robinson sold off for Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Hurts, and Travis Etienne. I mean, at least you got another elite quarterback back in this trade. But at the same time, like, why did this person make this trade? Like, you weren't competitive.
Hey, that elite quarterback's gone, by the way, and we'll talk about why.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this team is in such bad shape that you just basically have to get whatever you possibly can. So the trades that I don't know for sure if Jonathan made these trades. I'm assuming he did. He said a couple weeks back he took over this team, April 19th. I'm assuming he made the trades that went down there. He sells off Puka Nacua, 2026 second rounder, 209 for Stephon Diggs, 204, 207, 212, and a second. I'm assuming you made this deal because you assume you can get more for Diggs later on in a trade. But, like, to be honest, dude, like, if you had Puka Nacua on this team, like, you shouldn't have been selling for, like, yes, you should have been selling for volume of assets, but you need to get at least one first in there.
Like, if this is like Nico Collins or something, I understand. Why are you trading for Stephon Diggs? Like,
it's a buy low with the intention to sell later, I'm assuming, is why you did it.
If you can get first round liquidity and you know your league that well, sure. But realistically, in the majority of leagues I'm in, Stephon Diggs is not going to be able to get a first round pick, even if he was the wide receiver 6 at one point next year, to be honest.
Yeah, like, if you were going to sell Puka, you should have been looking for, like, again,
first
even if you're
rounders
selling
plus
90 cents on the dollar for him, like, you got to at least get a 1 and a 2, man. Like, and in your position, I'm aiming for 26 picks because you're not competing.
27 picks.
So aim for 26 and 27 where people don't give two shits about those draft picks. Maybe in this type of league, because people are orphaning teams like this, you're not able to trade that far into the future, and I wouldn't blame your commissioner for that either. But yeah, you got to get more when you're selling off these players. And Jalen Hurts, Etienne, Pacheco, second rounder and a third rounder. You did get the 103, 105, 203, Charbonnet and Ford, whatever. It's still probably not enough, man.
No, it's not.
Selling these guys in package deals, I know it's like that's what you want to do because you want to get these players off of your team and you want to tank your pick and you want to get draft picks for them. But if you were going to get more selling Jalen Hurts by himself and then selling Etienne by himself and then selling Pacheco by himself, you should have been reaching out to multiple owners trying to make these deals. It looks like what I think you did, which some people do with orphans if they're inexperienced trying to build them, is they're like, let's get everybody off my team right now. Like, I can't have anybody on my team right now. It's like sometimes you got to be patient with these guys and wait for buying windows, wait for selling windows on certain players. And if Etienne and Pacheco aren't in selling windows yet, then you're unfortunately just going to have to wait until the season when they are.
If this deal was just Hurts and Etienne for the other side, that's one thing. But, like, why did you also have to add in Pacheco a 2 and a 3 here?
Yeah, exactly. So for me, it's just, I look at some of these deals and it's like, again, the overall overarching theme is like, yeah, get volume of assets, get a lot of picks, which you're doing, which is good. It's just that, like, you're probably selling 75 cents on the dollar. And if I was a contender in this league, I would be eating this shit for breakfast, man. Like,
I'm not going to lie.
Oh my God, Jalen Hurts, Etienne, and Pacheco available for these prices. Like, I'm all over that shit.
I'm not going to lie. I'll tell you this as it is. Again, like, Dynasty Decisions is an informative video. We're trying to get you guys on the right track. If I saw these two trades go down on April 19th, I would be thinking in my head, well, this roster is easy pickings. Anything I want, I can get.
Yeah, exactly. I've literally seen trades like this go down in my league. And my first thought is, okay, am I contending? And if I am, I'm literally, like, coming after you, sending you, low ball, like 2/3 for Keenan Allen type of offers.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's tough. I understand, like, the majority of the issues. Again, I don't even know if he made these moves. Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. I do think I understand getting picks.
Let's hope for your sake you did not make these moves.
Hopefully. Because, I mean, like, Puka Nacua, like, I'm not trading Puka Nacua for Stephon Diggs plus. I'm trading him for 2 firsts. I'm trading him for future liquidity. Hell, even if it's like 2 firsts in 2027, at least they're future first round picks that you can bank on gaining value. I just don't see a world where Stephon Diggs gains value And it's like you basically traded Puka for Diggs and 2-2s here.
Yeah, and it's like if it was Puka on one side and the 4 2s plus Diggs, that would be more stomachable. It's like, okay, you got a lot of assets, but you also had to give up 2s on your own side of that deal too. So like that's why it doesn't really add up in our mind. I don't think the Diggs part of it was what you were trading for. I think you were trading for the 2s mainly, and then Diggs was just a throw in because the guy didn't want him anymore. But for me, it's just like, even if your intention is to buy Diggs and then sell him later, I'm honestly like, that's more work than it's set out to be, unless the guy's just a screaming obvious positive regression candidate in terms of their value. And for me, it's like Diggs isn't one of those screaming obvious positive regression candidates. There's a very good chance he continues to lose value.
Well, I mean, that's what I was saying earlier. Even if he's a wide receiver 1 to start the year, how much value does he gain? Is he a top 25 dynasty wide receiver? Because I'd be hard pressed to even see that.
Yeah, and you might only get 1-2 for him anyway, so you're better off just probably trying to sell Puka for 1s. Anyways, we've ripped on these deals enough. Again, it's not easy when you're taking over an orphan. There's not a lot that you can do, but at the same time, you probably, when you're making deals, the best piece of advice we can offer you is don't even ask for 2024 picks from people. Don't even ask for 2025 picks from people if they value the 25 class. 26, 27, if you're allowed to trade for those picks, go ahead and do it. If you're not, maybe just go for 2025 picks at that point in time. But yeah, you got some work to do clearly with this roster because it's in pretty rough shape. So let's move on to Ahmed's team here. 12-team PPR, super flex format. CJ Stroud, Justin Herbert as the main quarterbacks there. Jahmyr Gibbs and company at running back. J-Mo, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jordan Addison, Christian Watson, and some other guys at wide receiver. 2 Terrace Marshalls somehow. He cloned himself. Kyle Pitts, Sam Laporta at tight end there. And then he does have quite a bit of draft capital. He doesn't actually list what his
he has it listed here.
So he's that early first rounder is in fact the 101. That mid first rounder is 107. The 112 is that late first rounder. And he also has, he doesn't actually list his second round picks though, but I guess that's probably 201 as a second round pick. And then who cares? They're late thirds. It's not really important what pick number they actually are. So what are your thoughts on the team? And then we'll get into some of his actual questions that he has here.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of structure, obviously the main concern right now would be the wide receiver core. There's a lot you have to think optimistically. You don't really have a needle moving player, but who knows? JSN some upside, Jordan Addison, maybe Christian Watson bounce back. Regardless, though, start 9 league, you need needle movers to be able to compete. The first train of action that I'm taking is knowing that you have Herbert and Stroud as your main building blocks, Jahmyr Gibbs at running back as your anchor, Kyle Pitts as your tight end. Can you see if the 101, and he actually mentions here, he says, I don't really see the point in taking Caleb with how good my quarterbacks are. The guy at the 103, I have a pending trade with on the left, but I don't know if he's interested in the 101. I also don't think he has enough things to trade me for it, and the 102 doesn't need a quarterback. His question basically is, should I take Marvin with the 101, or should I trade back even if it is with the 104 and stick with Neighbors instead? I mean, those are the 2 main decisions. Obviously, you do your due diligence, see if 101 straight up can get you one of the main 3 receivers. Then it's like, okay, what's 104 willing to offer to get me to move from Marv to Neighbors? From a market cost standpoint, we know Marvin Harrison being a top 12, top 13 level startup ranking for both of us. I believe I have him at 11. You have him at 13, right?
Yep.
And then versus Malik Neighbors, you're looking at more so a 2-3 valuation. If somebody's willing to say, hey, you know what? I love Marvin Harrison Jr. I lucked into this 104 because I'm a contending team and somebody gave me their free first rounder last year. And I kind of want to upgrade my immediacy of a contending window. Are you able to get 104 plus a 2025 first, maybe for the 102 plus a second? That's the type of move I'd be looking to make.
Yeah, I think that would make some sense there. I think if it comes down to it, worst case scenario, I guess I'm okay taking Marvin Harrison 101. But yeah, definitely do your due diligence. If you can get a first rounder on top of the 104 in some form or fashion, like you said, even if you have to give up a 2 on your own end because you have an extra 2 in 2025 or whatever the case, maybe you got to send those 2 late 3s that you have this year because they like the depth of this class or whatever. Yeah. Then just try and do that to get it done. But yeah, if I had to stick and pick at your picks, 101, I'd probably take Marvin Harrison. At 107, hopefully Romo Dunze falls to you. Maybe slide up
the 107.
He's actually trading the 107. No, he didn't. He has a pending trade for it.
Correct. He has a pending trade for the 107. So I'm assuming either that guy agreed upon it and hasn't accepted.
I think it just means that he has a deal potentially on the table when he says pending. Maybe it's pending as in it's actually gone through already. But to me, pending means it's on the table for me right now.
So let's contextualize this. 107, let's just say it's Roma Dunze at that spot, because obviously you would take, in your position, Roma Dunze over JJ McCarthy. Maybe JJ McCarthy goes 107. I don't know. I'm just contextualizing. Let's just say that's Roma Dunze in your spot. Roma Dunze in exchange for Barkley, a first and a second. Barkley ends up being your RB2. You still have the first and second of 2026 liquidity to be able to move at a later date. You still have 2025 first to be able to add to that wide receiver room. I think I'm doing this deal.
Yeah, I think it's a really good return. It kind of sucks that it's like an aging running back and not a young running back, because then it would fit like a house money team. And then in 2025, you should be ready to compete type of build. But you could always turn around and sell Barkley for a young wide receiver or something like that. There's no law that says you have to keep Saquon on your roster.
He also has, I didn't even notice this, he has Kyle Pitts listed at the top, but he also has Sam Laporta.
Yeah,
so
no, I mentioned that. He has Kyle Pitts,
yeah.
Laporta, and Michael Mayer. So his tight end core is set. His running back core, assuming he adds Barkley in this deal, like he'd probably be in a good enough position to compete at running back. He'd be missing a QB3. He'd be missing some wide receivers. I think the challenging thing for me is knowing that if you have this Barkley deal on the table and you do it, you're in a position where like you're kind of pigeonholing yourself in to compete with Barkley. Like I'm okay doing this, assuming you can actually move Barkley after this trade. That's what I would say.
Exactly. Like realistically, if you can get future, at least let's just say a 2025 mid projected first for a team that's trying to contend, maybe they're
or better yet, go buy low on Nico Collins or
go
something.
Buy a
like
receiver.
That with Saquon.
I think that would be an excellent move. If Barkley is able to get you a young wide receiver to fit your build, maybe somebody's worried about Stephon Diggs being acquired. You do have CJ Stroud as well for the stack. I think Nico Collins, actually, I really like that shout by you. I think in most leagues, Barkley versus Collins could be a discussion. Maybe you have to add a couple of those late threes to get it done. And then when you're contextualizing Rome Odunze versus Nico Collins, a first and a second, well, although I prefer Rome Odunze to Nico Collins, Nico Collins is still a top 24 dynasty wide receiver for me. Even if Rome Odunze is valued as the wide receiver 12, I'm every single time moving from wide receiver 12 to wide receiver 24 if I'm getting a first and second of liquidity. And to be honest, I don't really care the year.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you bumped your receiver core down, because right now, like JSN and Addison are your top two guys. If you add Marvin, that makes him your top guy. And then you also added a Nico Collins or somebody in that general vicinity at wide receiver. And then those guys are your 3 and 4. Then suddenly your wide receiver core looks a lot better. At 112, you have the option, which will be definitely, do you take like a Ladd McConkey, Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas Jr., which is probably the option I would take. Yep. But you also could take Bo Nix if he's there too, because you don't have a quarterback 3 at this point in time. So you have a couple things on the table. He also has an early second too. You could also take potentially Bo Nix or Michael Penix with that pick. That's probably the route I would go. Let's say Brian Thomas or Ladd McConkey or Worthy fall to you with your 112. You take that, and then suddenly you go Marvin, this trade with the this Barkley move here, and then maybe you sell Barkley off, or even, I mean, if Odunze is there, you could also just keep Odunze as well. And then 112, you grab like, say, Ladd McConkey. And then at 202 or whatever that early second is, you grab Bo Nix as your third quarterback. Then suddenly you're going to be in a nice little house money situation. Let your young players develop for a year. And then in 2025, you spend those 2 1s, you spend those 2 2s, and you should be ready to rock and roll and try and win a championship. So, I mean, again, this team's in a little bit of a shaky position because like the deal you have on the table doesn't exactly fit your build, and you still kind of need some studs, and you're not necessarily positioned with the right picks to address the positions that you have of need. So it's going to take some trading on your part.
Yeah, no, for sure. Overall, though, you have a lot of liquidity to be able to move around. And like Corey said as well, if you can transition Sam Laporta into an equivalent wide receiver, or maybe Picks Plus, or Kyle Pitts into an equivalent wide receiver or Picks Plus, I think that would be a good route as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's close this video out with the last team that we're going to cover here, which is from Hunter D. A 10-team PPR lineup format here, 4-point per passing touchdown, half tight end premium, super flex league. CJ Stroud definitely just on everybody's team in this video today. Kirk Cousins as the second quarterback, Rashad White, James Cook, Javonte Williams, Najee Harris, J.K. Dobbins, Justin Jefferson, Calvin Ridley, and not a whole lot else at wide receiver. And then Cade Otton, Greg Dulcich, Tyler Conklin, and others there. So another orphan. So 2 orphans in this video too. This is an even more weird orphan that I've seen, because this is like, normally with orphans, it's like they look like the first orphan where there's just like no studs and you have to like deal with whatever you have to deal with. It's like there's a couple really good players on this roster, and then just like absolutely the bottom fell out in terms of depth. So I don't know what the hell this guy did in terms of trading away his 24 first, his 2025 first. Like, was he trading away first round capital for like J.K. Dobbins and Jerry Jeudy types last year? That must have been the case.
Yeah, Jameson Williams, like James Cook, Javonte, like you said, Najee, like that's the maybe Kirk Cousins, like that's probably what happened. I mean, the first train of action, I'm sure you're going to agree, is it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to look like a deal that's in your favor. But what does the guy want that has your 2025 one? Because guess what, man? I'm dropping a fucking nuke on this team. This shit is getting blown the hell up.
Yeah, it's like it would be lovely to keep Justin Jefferson on this roster
You
and keep
can't.
like some of those guys. You probably
can't.
cannot, unfortunately, because you don't have the capital to rebuild this thing unless you want to wait 2 years and burn 2 years of Justin Jefferson's prime sitting on your bench and not scoring any or not
Yeah.
sitting on your bench, but like not scoring you any meaningful fantasy points. I like the trade that you made when you took this thing over, though. You sell off Bijan Robinson, Kenneth Walker in the 302, transition those running back assets into CJ Stroud, basically, who is the important part of this deal. That's a great move. I mean, you got off of the running back talent that you had on this roster, which this guy is just a complete boomer. He had Bijan, Kenneth Walker, Rachaad White, James Cook, Javonte Williams, Najee Harris,
No good
and J.K.
receivers, no
Dobbins on
good
his team.
quarterbacks. Yeah, no good receivers, no good quarterbacks, other than Justin Jefferson, of course.
Yeah. So who was even starting at quarterback too? Gardner Minshew last year, I guess,
Zach
was
Wilson,
his quarterback
baby.
too.
Zach
Yeah.
Wilson.
So, anyways, this guy didn't know how the hell to build a team. He was just going complete tone setters, only running backs was the name of the game here. So, I mean, yeah, you're going to have to blow this thing up. You sold Bijan already. You sold Kenneth Walker already. That's a great move. You got yourself a young quarterback who's, even if you have to sit 3 years on this team, CJ Stroud's going to still be in his prime. So that's totally fine. Rachaad White, James Cook, Javonte Williams, Najee Harris off my team as much as I can get for them as soon as possible, ideally. Maybe you have to wait until earlier in the season until, say, Rachaad White's putting up like top 12 weeks, 3 straight games to start the 2024 season, and you can sell them off for a future 2026 first or a 2025 first or something. But regardless, I think you probably know at this point, based on your first move that you've done with this team, you got to sell everybody.
Yeah, I mean, there's no players you're holding. Yes, like Corey said, it would be awesome if you could hold Justin Jefferson. It would be awesome. Even like I love CJ Stroud, but guess what, man? If somebody says, hey, I'm offering you 4+ first of value for CJ Stroud, you're selling CJ Stroud. I offer you 3.5+ first of value for Justin Jefferson, you're selling Justin Jefferson. The first plan of action is, like I said, ask the guy who has your 2025 first what that cost would be. Otherwise, I mean, if you're unable to trade for it, I get why that guy wouldn't want to give you your pick back.
I wouldn't give it to you for like, I would want one of your stud assets. Like if you offered me Rachaad White for it or whatever, I'd be like, oh, Rachaad White for a projected late first would be a half decent deal in 2025, but your first is not projected to be late.
Your first is the 101. Let's keep it blunt.
Yeah, it will be, at least after you sell off all these assets. So the first thing that you should do, like you said, is go get your one. Maybe that person is dumb enough that they don't realize what you're doing. But in most leagues that have any kind of sharp players, they're going to understand exactly what you're doing right away.
Yeah, and by the way, we got to outline this. There's a couple just absolute asshole former managers in this video just leaving these horrible orphans behind. Like, I feel so bad.
Yeah, I mean, again, when people ask me to take over orphans, they're like, oh, I have an orphan in my league. Do you want it? I'm like, probably. Like, my answer is almost probably not every single time because they're orphans for a reason. Nobody leaves a championship caliber roster in their dynasty league. It's always people who ruined their team by trading all their picks away for bad players. And then they're like, oh, I didn't win the championship in the first 2 years. I'm gone. Like that's why when we set up leagues, we encourage you to get like 2 years up front and all that kind of stuff. If anybody trades 2025 picks away or 2026 picks away, you got to pay in for that year. So that's just a side tangent of like what you should do in dynasty startups. But yeah, a lot of bad managers leaving behind their trash for our listeners to try and take care of. So hopefully you can get this thing up to speed. Like I said, any of the stud assets and even like the solid production pieces, because like Rachaad White, James Cook, Calvin Ridley, Javonte Williams, they're not worth nothing. Kirk Cousins, not worth nothing. Like you can get some good stuff for those guys, but aim for future stuff like 25, 26, because people will be more likely to give you better value.
If the best offer is a 2025 2 and 3 for Rachaad White and Najee Harris, instead go here. I don't need a 2025 pick. Give me your 2026 1 and 2 instead. And that's more likely to go down knowing that people are going to contextually see the year 2026 and think, I got 2 years to figure it out and get that capital back. That's a lot of the frame of mind that goes, especially when it's more contending teams in certain leagues where they look at the James Cook, the immediate production. They look at Javonte Williams, the immediate production, Najee Harris, Rachaad White. And if it helps them win a championship, they're more willing to just give away that future pick for 80% of the value.
Yeah, especially if they're planning to orphan their team after they didn't win the championship.
Yeah, maybe like this guy, follow suit.
Literally. And this guy, whoever made the trades with him are probably laughing right now because they're sitting on the 101 this year or like a top 5 pick this year and then the 101 next year, and they're just laughing about it. So again, definitely take advantage of managers if they think they're in contending windows. That's just like an overall theme of dynasty trading that I always like to do. Like, do I want to deal with the guy who has the monster? No, because I know his pick is absolutely going to be late in the draft. I want to deal with the guys who are stuck in limbo, who are stuck in the middle, who, if one or two bad injuries happen, I end up with the 103 or the 104.
Amen. Yeah, no, I think you outlined it pretty well. Your next goal, like we said, recoup as much draft capital as you get. First plan of action, try to get that 2025 one. Assuming that guy's unwilling to give it, then you plan, hey, can I get 2026 picks, 2027 picks, whatever picks you're allowed to trade for. I know Sleeper, technically speaking, can only let you trade up to 2027s, but who knows? Maybe you're in a league setup that just says, hey, like if you make trades for 2028, 2029, they just write it on a spreadsheet. I don't know. As far as possible as you can get, if you can get more value. Like, fuck, if you want to control the 2029 class where all the 15-year-olds are pretty much in right now, go ahead.
Yeah, we're making some NBA trades out here where
For
people
real.
are trading away 2028 picks for stuff. Anyways, that is the end of the video. We did break down a lot of times. Some people in the comments, accuse us of just breaking down really monstrous dynasty teams. We got in the muck today. We got some dirty rosters here. So,
Greasy.
lot of gross dynasty teams. Comment down below. This might have been the dirtiest dynasty decisions that we've ever done so far. So if that interests you, orphan content is what we have over here. If you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new around here. Again, if you do want your team covered, maybe you're taking over a disgusting orphan yourself, head on over to Flock Fantasy. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up, and you get first priority to these episodes, Dynasty Decisions. We hope to run them at least once a week going forward. Hopefully, we'll maybe even double up this week, given that a lot of people are in rookie drafts coming up, and maybe they're already doing rookie drafts. Like me and you have already done a couple rookie drafts so far, and you definitely want to hear how you did in terms of the rookie draft and all that kind of stuff. So head on over to Flock Fantasy for all that stuff. Use promo code FSE, like I said. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.